All right, welcome back. Snap Around. This is our third season here. We got Travis, we got Justin, I'm Brock. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And something new, obviously, you've seen right now. We are doing video chats, or we're doing live video this year. So you can catch us on YouTube as well as listening on your favorite podcast network. Also, some big news, boys. Over the summer, we partnered with the Hockey Podcast Network. So going to be kind of fun working into the under this umbrella, but still, just a disclaimer at the start of the episode here. This is our first time using new software and everything, so apologies if the show's a little choppy or anything else. It's learning curve for us here, boys. But I guess first things first, how'd the rest of your summers go since we last talked?
Yeah, mine turned out really busy after I took a look at the old calendar at the start of the summer and I was like, I don't have too much going on this year, and then all of a sudden next thing I know I didn't have a free weekend. So um but it was good. It was good. Held down the fort at center field with JC for our beer league ball team, which was lots of fun. And yeah, just lots of other small little things here and there in between, visiting friends and um, just having a grand old time.
How about you there, JC?
Yeah, kind of like Trav, where I thought I had a lot of summer at the start, but with working on the house and baseball, some weddings, bachelor parties, it's already almost October and ready to start hockey. But I mean, it was a good summer. Just didn't really seem like it was here for that long, and it was already gone. But I'm ready to get back into this, though. I'm kind of missing hockey this last kind of little bit here.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, the July kind of seemed to drag on, but August seemed to just fly by, and September has completely just flown by. As like you said, we're a week from October and just under 2 weeks from the start of the season of the NHL season at the time of this recording here. So hockey's right around the corner. Preseasons have begun. Let's maybe start there, guys. That the preseasons kind of what turned into some bigger news, though. Maybe not so much in the overall hockey, but especially around Ontario in the junior hockey markets a bit. Some of the bigger names in the OHL, the 19-year-olds, guys like Colby Barlow, Easton Cow, and Callum Ritchie, they held out of their OHL training camps, which always happen around the end of August. Reasoning for this was because they wanted to focus on getting ready and getting themselves prepared for to have a strong NHL camp. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this or not, but like it's just one where we've never really heard a lot of this before, and now all of a sudden three kind of prominent OHL players all do it in the same summer. So like either you guys have a thought on this or anything. Is this maybe a blip or is this maybe going to be the new norm for some 19-year-olds?
Well, when you brought it up yesterday, I didn't really know what you were talking about because I thought this kind of just was what they did. I didn't realize the OHL camp started that early, but for guys like that of that caliber, I don't really like. I understand why the junior teams probably wouldn't like it, but for just kind of their own personal development, I get why you would kind of stick around. You know, like like Calum Ritchie, like he's nowhere near Ontario or Oshawa. He'd be in Denver, and you'd probably want to get, especially up there, get used to like altitude, things like that, and probably practicing with guys of the next caliber, which is probably what guys like that need, like practicing with AHL and NHL players. And I mean, it works out well for guys that are trying to make the camp with the OHL teams because there's probably an extra spot or two with these guys that are missing that, gets another kid, some eyes on another kid that maybe wouldn't have had that chance with those guys gone. But I imagine for guys like, the three you mentioned and the other guys of, that 19 age group probably will be a thing going forward until they either get cut loose or they eventually just make the team.
Yeah. You got any thoughts on that, Trav? Or
Not a lot, no. I mean, I can certainly make sense of it. Like like JC kind of said there, just a whole note for the NHL camp being ready to go. I think I can wrap my head around the idea of maybe not wanting an early burnout. Attending OHL camp and then having to fly down to whichever city of team that you're drafted by, and kind of get settled in there, and then get ready to go for an even bigger camp. So yeah, not a lot of thought there, but I certainly can wrap my head around the idea of why they did it.
again, I totally understand where those players are coming from. I think my gripe with it might be that if it's one that starts becoming the norm in this, it's more Colby Barlow out of those three was the highest draft pick at 18 overall. You don't often see a lot of 18th overall picks play in their after just a full season after their draft. Like it kind of takes about 2, maybe even 3 years after getting drafted for guys in the late teens and in the 20s to truly step in. Obviously, there's always exceptions, but when you look at the teams that these guys are holding, like trying to make in terms of NHL, Colorado, Winnipeg, and Toronto are pretty well, like they're pretty stacked up front. They don't have a lot of holes. They have a lot of bigger contracts, and maybe that's where you can kind of play the angle that these guys are hoping that their ELCs play effect in terms of helping the teams manage their cap situations more with how much big money's up front already. But it's still just one where I guess it's not so much that they're holding out, and really it's not so much that for the Richie or the Cowan holding out. It's just Barlow's situation in one sound because the Attack aren't a big OHL city like Oshawa or London. They rely so much on drawing in attendance and having some of the bigger name players that when they get on the roster to come and stick around for as long as possible. So it does hurt a team like Owen Sound a little bit financially. It's not going to hurt a London or Oshawa, but ultimately it's one where the players have to do what's best for them in this situation. The OHL teams have to kind of accept it. And like you said, Justin, too, it opens up room for a bunch of 16 and 17-year-old kids trying to make the OHL team that they might not have otherwise had the opportunity. But I guess the last one on this, though, guys, before we move on, what's your overall thoughts? Like, this seems to be becoming a lot more the norm of NHL teams kind of in a purgatory with a bunch of 19-year-old CHLers in terms of like having to keep them up or send them back to junior. There's so much flip flopping going on, so much manipulation of playing a certain number of games, holding them out, just practicing, healthy scratching. Are we starting to see a situation where the NHL and CHL player agreement has to get changed here just to benefit the players more than anything?
Yeah, I've been kind of saying this for a few years now that I think it probably should because, you have guys that come back and the league's not competitive enough for them, like the CHL. But if they are not good enough or there's no roster spot on the NHL team to make, and like the perfect solution is for them to go to the AHL, and it's probably better for the player and it's probably better for the NHL team. The only thing it really hurts is juniors, and I mean small markets too, right? Like the Attack, like if they didn't get Barlow back, like especially this year, like their team is, it's hurting. Like even they can't even trade them for future assets for next year or whatever, right? So like it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that sort of sense. But as for wanting your favorite teams players to progress like the fastest and the best, like you kind of want this agreement to kind of take new forms for them to play in the AHL, because like the European guys can do it. It's not the same because they're already playing in pro leagues over there anyways, but I would like to see it just, more specifically for this age group, because, a lot of these guys are too good to go back anyways. And as long as they can go back to the World Juniors, like from the AHL, which they would be able to anyways.
Yeah, his World Juniors is all about, it's about age. It's not so much about where you're playing. Like you brought up the interesting point of the Europeans can do it. And another thing, just quick last one here. I don't know, Trav, if you have anything to add on to this conversation or not after, but like the NCAA and CHL agreement is changing here too. The NCAA is going to soon, I think starting 25-26 season, they're going to start allowing CHL players to play in the NCAA Division I schools. That's never happened. Those guys have always had to go to basically either quit playing like good level hockey and just focus on school, or do the U Sports hockey for Canadian universities, which again, no knock on Canadian universities, but you don't always get the same level of the hockey's not quite as good, but it is very underappreciated. But also the schooling isn't quite the same too in Canada as opposed to the US. So I don't know, Trav, I'll let you have one kick at the can here and we'll move on to some bigger topics.
Well, I'll just kind of bounce off your point there. Guys holding out, either down in the NCAA or, moving up to the U Sports in Canada. I just think of, Cale Makar as a prime example. Held out from going to college, was playing in the AJHL when he was drafted. And I don't know if you boys have seen that video of Nathan MacKinnon kind of talking about the day that Joe Sakic drafted Cale Makar, and McKinnon was like, who did we just draft at number 4? Makar could have easily, I mean, if this ruling was in play, Makar could have been playing it in the WHL prior to moving down to UMass, but obviously, he had to spend some time in the AJHL before he went down to UMass, and I think, obviously, everything worked out for him. We all know what kind of player he is, but for certain guys, that can definitely hinder their development. Being held out of the CHL for a time when they're eligible to be there.
That's maybe the biggest thing that is going to come with this agreement is what's it going to be? Is it you have to play 4 years in the CHL before you can move down? Or is it one where you can just play your 16, 17 age years and then go to university? So it's just one I think we're going to have to keep an eye on, because it's definitely going to change the landscape of junior hockey and almost a lot of like draft scouting processes for a lot of teams, and just the overall actually scouting process now, because it's a new wrinkle that's never been in this situation before. But we move on to more NHL news. We'll start with maybe the biggest splash in all of the summer. The rare offer sheet happened not once, but twice, boys. And not only that, it happened the same day, the same team for both providing the offer sheet and the team that they were trying to steal the players from. Doug Armstrong, the St. Louis Blues, offer sheeting Philip Broberg, Dylan Holloway. Trav, you were kind of keen on going in on this. What's just your initial thoughts on this overall situation and how it played out?
Well, Doug Armstrong kind of summed it up perfectly when he said, like, it's there for a reason. It kind of goes hand in hand with the LTIR loophole. And obviously, I think I speak for all of us when we say we're not fans of it, but it is legal. And it's there to your advantage, whether you want to use it or not. And it's the same with the offer sheets. I'm surprised we don't see more of this, to be honest, because it's been there for how many years. and it's kind of a tactic that's sort of been put on the back burner in the National Hockey League. And I certainly thought that Edmonton was going to at least get back one of those guys. I'm really surprised that both guys walked there. But, obviously, the Oilers have their hands tied here with a new McDavid contract set to come up, and, Draisaitl just making that big signing, which we're obviously going to get into a little bit later here. But, yeah, it was, a sneaky move by the Blues, and I don't frown upon it by any means.
Yeah, you brought up we definitely thought the Oilers were going to keep one of them with all those moves, and we talked about it pretty extensively in our group chat. Like, Justin, were you surprised because we saw the Cody Ceci trade, and then subsequently both guys went to St. Louis without a match on the offer?
I was a little surprised they didn't. Yeah, I was surprised they didn't keep one of them, especially with kind of like the flurry of moves that they made. But this kind of like what Trav was saying there. This is basically like the perfect example of why offer sheets work. Doug Armstrong positioned it for that. Each one made it to like the top of one tier before he had to give up more assets, and he knew exactly where Edmonton was at. Like, Edmonton went out and kind of made their bed early in the off season with the signings that they had made with, Arvidsson. Skinner was cheap, but they bring back Janmark and Henrique. I think they kind of thought that it's like, these guys are RFAs. They're not very proven. Like, they're probably fine. Like, we'll get a deal. Like, they'll take a cheap deal to stay here for like 1 or 2 years, and then we'll figure out something down the road. And, time passes on. And then, especially for Broberg, like, they come by with like what was like a high $3-4 million deal. Like, you haven't really had that much time in the NHL, though he did look really good in the playoffs there. It's kind of a no-brainer to take the Holloway one. I'm not sure. I think he probably just wanted a deal done, so that's why he signed it. And I figured he assumed Edmonton was going to match that, because they easily could have, especially with the LTIR moves they have to make with Kane. But this is the first time in a while that an offer sheet that I've seen makes a lot of sense. The Aho one did in a way. He just wanted to sign one to get a contract. The Kotkaniemi one's going to go down as that was just a retaliatory move. But it's not the GM's fault for offering the offer sheets. It's the GM's fault for not managing your cap or roster wise salary if you want to keep these guys. That's basically as simple as that. If they had the room, they would sign them, but they had other plans. They wanted to go a different route with their roster. And, now their youngest forward other than Podkolzin is McDavid at 27. Just looking at that decor, the way that Broberg has started to play last year, I think they're going to miss him if he continues on the trajectory that he's got, because he's never really had a good shot at the NHL, and he's finally started getting one, and he's going to get a really good shot in St. Louis. So
you brought up a lot of points there. I think the one I want to circle back to is the kind of bringing up that it's not just the GMs that do this. It's not just the teams involved in offer sheets. It's the players have to be willing to sign the offer sheet too. And there's been lots of interviews and lots of quotes floating out since then that from more Holloway that I've seen out there, he kind of said that Edmonton didn't really approach him with a lot of offers until like day 6 after signing the offer sheet. So I do agree. It was one where you're kind of sitting in limbo by by the team that you're currently on. They're lowballing you. They want to play hardball. And this other team says, here's a 2-year deal worth $2.4 something million. Who's going to say no to that? Because they obviously see some type of value in you. And if you believe enough in yourself, in 2 years, you have it you have that over them, that they pulled you away from another team. You obviously valued me and I proved this, this, and this. So I'm going to ask for a $6-7 million contract. On the flip side of that, though, right now, you look at Edmonton's value that they just got, a second and third round pick. At this current stage, I'm pretty sure most of us would take both those picks in exchange for either player, especially in Edmonton's case, because that's just asset capital that they can use at the deadline to further bolster this roster. So it's more one, St. Louis is playing the long game here. And like you said, Edmonton kind of shit the bed on the short game and lost two quality young players that are kind of on the rise and just need maybe a bigger stage to find their next level of game. And I go back to your point, Trav, like, I think it's one where you don't often see offer sheets because it's only happens with players in this kind of caliber of skill level. It's the Brobergs, Holloways, the Kotkaniemis, the guys where they're in flux of, are they like a legit top six need in your lineup kind of player, or are they a tweener of like a middle six, bottom six, a top four, top four bottom pairing defenseman? Those tend to be the guys that get offer sheeted because some teams see maybe more of the upside with those guys and want to bring them in. And again, Justin, you said or I think both you guys have said it, Armstrong played it right to the last dollar in terms of maximizing the cap hit while minimizing what assets he gives up. So I don't know if you guys have, like, I guess overall though, is this one where, after saying all that rant, what's your guys' thoughts on the offer sheets overall? Like, is it a dying concept in the NHL because they've been so few and far between? Or does something like this summer spark maybe GMs to maybe really think about this maneuver in the future?
I think it's still on the fence right now. Just until you see, I'm trying to think how to word this. Like, Holloway and Broberg are both still kind of, I guess, like you said there, Brock, they're kind of question marks on, where their careers are added still. I think if you see a player that's a little more established get an offer sheet, you could see the floodgates open. But I could also, based on this situation, I could also see this being a one and done, and this whole offer sheet dilemma just kind of runs flat until you pretty much don't see it anymore. I could see it going either way, but I think if it's going to become a regular thing, I think you got to see a bit more of a household name on there, and that we're at this point now with the season starting, we're probably looking at next year for any kind of offer sheet now.
Yeah, especially given how a lot of like the RFAs that would land in that position have kind of reached bridge deals since camps have opened up here. So, Justin, you have any final thoughts on the offer sheets here?
No, it's something I'd like to see more. They were very few and far between with the two this year, and with Montreal and Carolina kind of going back and forth there, which I don't know, what was that, 4 or 5 years ago now?
Yeah,
it's kind of like, if you kind of look at it that way, it's kind of picked up a bit because there's really only like one here, one there for like a few years. So I think a lot of GMs are going to pay attention to what kind of happens here in St. Louis. And, with so many teams right now, it might change going into next year, like right up against the cap. Like, say almost half the teams in the league have like less than $3 or $4 million of cap space. So, you're going to see GMs probably look at this a lot more going forward. And then you're going to have the GM, the same GMs kind of maybe protect their RFAs a little bit more than leaving it till September to, to try to sign these guys, because you can't just let this linger. These guys want to play, right? They need contracts. So I kind of, long story short, I kind of hope we see more of it because it's pretty entertaining.
It definitely brings some entertainment value to the off season, but yeah, last thought before moving on. Like, I agree with you, Trav. There needs to be a bigger name, and Montreal really probably had the opportunity when they did the Aho offer sheet, and they dropped the ball because you got to. So many teams are so hooked on first round draft picks and just holding on to them for really just almost throw them away at the trade deadline is essentially what they want to hold on to them for. But unless you're a rebuilding team, ultimately though, like, you get these guys when they're 23, 24 years old, they have 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the league. You kind of know where they're at. You, for the most part, know kind of where they're going to go, especially with guys like at Aho's level, that you should be willing to give up 3 first-round picks to make it extremely difficult for the other team to match. Like, make them really think, do we want to take the first-round picks, or do we want to kind of overpay what we thought this guy was worth by $1.5 million, $2 million? It's just teams need to either start just managing their overall cap better and everything, or just start they throw around draft picks like they're candy anyway. Why not start doing it on offer sheet? Because you're like, you actually have control over it then. So that's kind of my last thought. Probably though, boys, will tough to transition to the next bit here. The biggest news in the hockey world over the summer is the saddest news: passing of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew, struck by drunk drivers. They were out just enjoying a bike ride. Everyone's heard the story by now. Again, it's been all over us here at Snappin Around. We just want to pay the proper respects to the family and everything that's happened since the tragedy, and ultimately just help bring more awareness that, like, it's such a somber incident when you look at that on the news and it hits home of just thinking, yeah, he was just a regular guy. It's not like these NHL players are anything special, that they're still regular people, families, and he's leaving behind a wife, 2 young kids. I think and they had a third one on the way for Johnny, Matthew too. I think I apologize, not fully versed in his background, but like, he was never really made the NHL. I know he'd switched into more of a coaching role and was building up a career through that way. Just 2 guys in the hockey world that were taken from us too soon. And yeah, like, I think right now, maybe do you guys maybe just have a Johnny Gaudreau story that you want to just share, and just about like what he was as a hockey player and what he meant to the NHL?
I think one of the biggest things about Johnny was that he was a big part of the small player movement. Probably the biggest since Marty St. Louis was in the league. He kind of took over that role as St. Louis was kind of edging retirement at the start of Johnny's career. But I think the moment I go, kind of 2 moments I go back to. One being the double overtime winner in the first round of the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs when they beat Dallas in Game 7. Was just I didn't watch that game, but it seemed like game 1 to game 7 of that series was mirrored images of each other, where it was basically the Flames versus Jake Ottinger, and to see it go all the way to that depth, and for Johnny to get that goal, I know that was a big moment in Calgary. The other one was the assist on Nathan McKinnon's North American overtime goal. Probably the greatest 3-on-3 overtime I've ever watched. I don't think I can name another one that's greater. I can name a few that are up there, but that one probably takes the cake for the best 3-on-3 overtime I've watched. So, those were two really great hockey moments I'll always remember Gaudreau for. But a lot of the posts you see about Johnny and Matthew were how they're almost inseparable, and they were always kind of had each other's backs, did everything together. They were always in the same places together. But it's just it's such a mess left behind. There's so many people affected by such a senseless maneuver, tragedy, if you want to, however you want to word that. But unfortunately, I don't know too much about Matthew. I did see a post about him from somebody that he used to play, I want to say, college hockey with, that just kind of talked about how welcoming he was in the dressing room to that person at the time when they were a rookie at camp. And, that just seems to be right up the alley of who Johnny was as a person as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that World Cup too. I always think about the his penalty shot, and then like literally a minute later his breakaway where he completely undressed Lundqvist. Like, he was a special player, and like you said, Trav, just to do it at his size when he broke into the NHL. Justin, you have anything?
You're not really any moments that really stick out, like the ones that you guys talked about, but this is kind of awesome seeing all these stories. You know, for like people like us, we don't really see a lot of the things other than what they do on the ice, or like maybe the odd clip, but there's like all like the nice stories that kind of came out that kind of proved, what kind of people these guys were. Like, they didn't really hold themselves in kind of high regard in society, right? Like, especially Johnny, like kind of being, as famous in hockey as he is, but it's just too bad, because obviously all the stories that came out after, like what was going on that weekend, and this guy, he left Calgary because he wanted to be closer to home, which he took a lot of flack for, from fans, which was fine, but it was nice to kind of see all the commemorative things that they have been doing, and all the fans from like Edmonton, Vancouver too, that like showed up in Calgary to kind of show support as well. It's just one of those things that when I woke up and read about it, it's kind of like there was like a rumor going around that it happened. You kind of hope it wasn't. Then all the details come out, and all these things, like people, hockey accidents happen all the time. This one really hit me about as hard as probably like the Humboldt one, just because it's things that you do kind of all the time, like riding a bus or riding your bike around, and you just kind of don't really like think that anything bad's going to happen. And all of a sudden, it's something that's not your fault, just kind of just, the unthinkable happens, and it's so awful. Those guys were doing the right thing that night. Like, who knows what they were up to that night, right? Like the night before their wedding. but they're, you know, just riding a bike, having a good time. And, you know, somebody just, you know, makes a stupid mistake and stupid choice, I guess, more or less. But yeah, I don't know. That one, just as soon as I heard that, like, you know, instant kind of goosebumps, just like makes you, it reminded me of, yeah, like the other tragedy in Humboldt, like obviously a different magnitude, but still just like things that we do all the time. And, you know, you never know when it's going to be it. Right. And just so unfortunate.
Yeah, really is. Trav.
Yeah, I kind of remembered another Johnny moment. And I'm not sure how well you guys remember this, but probably one of the most underrated performances at the World Juniors in 2013 when USA won gold. Gaudreau lit up that tournament, and maybe he doesn't have, like pack stats to show for it, but he had a really good outing. I remember watching that tournament back in the day, and USA was far and away the best team in that tournament. And I just remember, it felt like every goal that he had some part of it, or I feel like I remember just consistently hearing his name in that tournament, and it was like, and at the time, I think that was the first time I had heard about him, and I was like, who has this guy? And you find out he's drafted by Calgary, and it's like, man, this kid's gonna be a weapon in the league. And lo and behold, he had a pretty good career, to say the least.
Yeah, that World Juniors was his coming out party as a 5th-round pick, and yeah, his unreal hockey career cut way too short. And again, we just condolences to the family and everyone, the city of Columbus and the Blue Jacket fans, city of Calgary and the Flames fans. Just it's a tragedy that affects the whole hockey world and actually the whole sporting world. So tough to move on from that. We'll take a quick break for some ad reads here, and we'll get back into it. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. As kids, we were always curious about everything, but somewhere along the way, that curiosity faded, and you may now feel trapped in a routine. Therapy is a great option to help you rediscover that sense of curiosity. In my experience, therapy provided me the tools for coping with stressful situations and gave me the confidence to setting appropriate boundaries so I can take control of my life. So, if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suit your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. If for some reason you don't connect, you can switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN, and add curiosity back into your life. TD, Tutty, take it to the house. Whatever you call a touchdown, they matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? Well, you can score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when they bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
All right, guys. Final topic here for our first episode of season 3. Trav, you alluded to it earlier with Draisaitl. There's lots of between RFA extensions, between extensions of upcoming UFAs for next summer. There's lots of big news happen over the summer in many different regards. Let's just I kind of said, we'll each pick one of the extensions that kind of caught our eye and just really explain why we liked it, why we did, what's maybe negative about it, what's the bright spot for it, and just your overall thoughts on what the extension means for both the player and the team overall. So, Trav, let you go first here. I think I know which one you're going with.
Yeah, I mean, I might as well go with the Draisaitl one since I already mentioned it. I did, I did really like the Crosby signing, but I'll leave that one on the table if one of you two are thinking about that. So I'll go with the Draisaitl one here. First and foremost, like most times on this show, I was dead wrong about Draisaitl. I think it was one of the last episodes we did last season where I believe we got into a discussion about the future of Leon Draisaitl, and I was convinced that Draisaitl would leave this Oilers team, even
you were
if they
set in stone. He was going to San Jose.
Well, I heard a rumor about that. It wasn't San Jose. I was just set that he was leaving. I was sure of it, even if they won the cup last year. But like many other things, I was wrong, and I'll be a lot more wrong next week when we're doing our predictions for the year. But moving on from that, obviously Draisaitl and McDavid, there's not really a number that revolves around them. Really, at the end of the day, McDavid especially a once in a lifetime player, but let's not forget how good Leon has been in the playoffs every year at the most critical point of the season. Leon has been pretty well every bit as good as McDavid. The only thing I think with this contract is knowing that McDavid's got a new one coming up that's probably going to be higher, unless I'm, quite mistaken. You got to wonder where the rest of that team fits in here, with both those guys on such a high salary. You got to wonder what kind of pieces they put around them. Obviously, they're in a win now mode. I would expect them to have a pretty big year again this year and another push for the cup. But so that's the only real downside to this contract. Obviously, Leon has stated that he wants to be in Edmonton. He wants to stay in Edmonton. That's great for the fans. Maybe Edmonton fans never doubted it, but I think a lot of other people around the league were certainly questioning, his intentions and where he was at in the Oilers organization. Obviously, they've had a lot of letdowns these past couple of years, and they reached pretty much the summit this year, and they were just one step short of it in Game 7. I don't have too much more on it, but I do like the signing. It's just my one thing is where does McDavid's number land, and where does this team, or how does this team shape up in 2 to 3 years?
I want to throw something at you. When you said a lot of outsiders thought he wasn't sure on him, how much did this kind of bring you guys back to around 2010s, right around like the height of the Penguins, a young Crosby, a young Malkin? There's a lot of noise of, at one point, Evgeny Malkin kind of maybe wanting to be the guy on his own team. how much of this did kind of brought you back to that? Because you have like a potential Mount Rushmore player in McDavid, just like you had back then with Crosby, and you have his Robin and Draisaitl kind of the Malkin level, like the star levels, the very eerily similar. Like this kind of bring you back to any of that with all the noise that happened around Pittsburgh at times?
I kind of forgot about that one, to be honest. But obviously, like Leon's irreplaceable. Like, yeah, he could pretty much go to almost any team in the league and be the number one guy. I mean, unless you're bringing in Nathan McKinnon or Austin Matthews, that's the closest replacements you're gonna get for a guy like Leon. I mean, he's a top 10 player in the league for sure. I mean, I don't know exactly where you guys would put him, but I think we could probably all get on board with that he's among the elites in the league. So yeah, I mean, just kind of reiterating, but it's good to see that he wants to be in Edmonton, and it's yeah, much more.
No, all good. Anyone that's been listening knows that we'll just get rambling on and just completely run out of thought at points. So now they just get to
sometimes when to stop.
Yeah. Now they just get to see our faces and just how we completely lose train of thought mid sentence. So, but no, all good, Trav. I think you kind of nailed a lot of it there. Just he's irreplaceable, and it's definitely going to put a watch on where does McDavid's number land at come next summer when he's eligible for his extension. Justin, what's your big signing there that happened later in the summer of extensions, RFAs, or maybe the UFAs that are a year out?
The one that it happened pretty recently, like I was more focused on RFAs because that's kind of what you were saying. There's two, one that hasn't signed that I still find interesting, which I think everyone knows which that, like, there's pretty much only one big one that's unsigned right now. But the one that really kind of got me was Dylan Guenther in Utah. It blew me away a little bit just because of how little he's been in the league. He signed for $57 million, I think it was his total. He's got 54 points in the league right now. So he's signed for more millions than points he's actually earned playing in this league. But I get that this league is kind of trending towards I'm going to pay you for what I think you can do compared to what have you done for me, more or less, or like you've shown what you can do. Here's your contract. Like, I feel like the times of the bridge contract are pretty much more or less gone out of the way. Don't tell Dawson Mercer or Cole Perfetti that, but it also kind of goes to show, like I had this conversation with somebody, it's just like, that's the kind of the maybe the downfall of playing on a good team that's kind of cash strapped. Like, they don't have that money to freely sign you to a long-term deal. It's like, we can do a short term and then we'll figure it out down the road. Like the Jets, New Jersey, like, who are going to be better than they were, but also cash strapped compared to like Utah, which I think is kind of, it shows well for them from moving from Phoenix, because it's just like, hey, we're here to spend money on you young guys that we're going to trust kind of with our future. So I like that for him. It just, maybe I'm still kind of in that old school way of like, they could sign him to a 2-year bridge and he'd still be an RFA at the end of it. And you would know a lot more about him then than you would now. Probably the way I prefer to run the team, but I don't know. They probably just believe in him enough. Like, I think Keller, someone was saying that, Keller was talking, and all the guys he practices with, he said in terms of like how wicked their shot is. There's Austin Matthews, and then there's Gunther, which I'd say is pretty high praise. Like, obviously, he doesn't practice with everybody, but I mean, that guy sees a lot of hockey players, and so there's something there. Like, he's very talented and very fun to watch. Like, he really turned it up at the end of last year. Like, I think he had 35 points in 47 games or something like that. So that's pretty good for a 21-year-old that hasn't had a lot of exposure in the league. So this next year coming up is going to be an interesting one to watch for him. And obviously good on him for, being able to, negotiate a deal for that for being 21 and not even playing a full season of games yet in the league. I just found that one probably the most interesting, but, guys like Faber, Jake Sanderson in Ottawa, they're all kind of signing deals like this right now too. I'm not sure like the weight on defenseman compared to forward is, but Lucas Raymond just did too, but he's had a lot more, there's a lot more book on him too, but no, I'm interested to see this, and I'm really interested to see it just because, a new team like with Utah and, it makes me more interested. Like, I'm more interested in the concept of watching Utah compared to watching Arizona play.
It's definitely going to be a factor. But you kind of brought it up. You'd run your team, do the bridge deal, and really see what you got in the player. I kind of understand where these GMs are coming from, some of them, because, again, the cap's going to start rising at some decent increments here in the coming years. If you believe enough in these young guys, sign them up, because they have Gunther locked in at that number. So if he explodes within the next year, 1, 2, 3 years, that contract can look like a steal real quick. Obviously, it can backfire really quick on you too. But there's so much more, especially with a guy like Gunther, who's such a highly touted offensive player, that he's going to make Armstrong look very smart for signing such a long deal and just locking in that guy at that number. That's kind of how I see some of that. And you brought up Raymond. He kind of did the long term. He got his $8 million. I'm kind of going to go. You brought up the bridge deals too, Justin. Kind of my big extensions kind of in between the Gunther and some of those bridge deals of Mercer and Perfetti, with Quentin Byfield's deal, the 5-year, just over $30 million overall. Like, talk about a guy that, I mean, this guy exploded last year on the scene, and if he just continues, just halfway through this season, that deal's going to look like a steal. And he's kind of going almost, you think about the Austin Matthews route, where he's just give me 5-year increments, 4 or 5-year increments contracts. It helps. I think maybe that's the way some players should do, is take those shorter midterm deals in terms of length, because you can maximize your money then. Like, Byfield's going to make $30 million by the end of this contract, and it's only going to put him around 26. So he can basically sign an 8-year deal north of probably $10 million per year, because by then he's likely going to be the next Anze Kopitar in LA. So, like, that's kind of I think he's of the same draft class as Gunther, both 21, just very limited NHL exposure, but two guys that have started to just find their footing, and the GMs are betting on the long-term upside of them.
Yeah. I've always liked Byfield, and that year I always thought he should have been number 1 over Lafreniere. Not that there's anything wrong with picking Lafreniere. I think he was kind of consensus, but going into that draft, I always thought that Byfield was the true number 1 out of those two.
At the time, Lafreniere was more NHL ready. Byfield had a lot of issues in his game that he needed to work out, and we kind of saw that with the amount of time he spent in the American League. And I think that's where you kind of went a few years later when Slafkovsky went first overall instead of guys like Beniers and Wright. It's not so much that Slafkovsky was, again, he made the NHL as an 18-year-old, but Montreal's betting that in his age, when those guys are 23 years old, Slavkovsky is going to be that much more impactful than the other guys. So again, that's just really though that's scouting in a nutshell. Though, like you're trying to, who's the guy that is going to help your GM's going to praise you for in the first round, especially a high pick. Your GM wants a guy that's going to step in right away. Whereas sometimes it's you have to preach to him like, no, like this is the right pick. It might just take 3 seasons before we see full value of them.
Yeah.
So,
And New York was in the position to pick a guy that was ready to step in.
oh, that whole situation still pissed me off. Going from 11th to first overall.
I do
And
have
then-
one question for you guys, though, just focusing on this, because it might be old news by the time we record again. Probably not, though, but there's one big RFA left in Swayman. What do you guys think he signs for? This is an interesting contract.
It's going to be very interesting.
What was
he
he
asking-
asking for again?
I think he wants around 8x8.
8.
I think he wants more.
I thought he wanted like 9 to 9.5 or something. I thought I read
Yeah.
that somewhere. And
He's holding it for something and like something dear, because like, you know, they already traded away their number 1 guy or 1A guy. But
Yeah.
this guy, Swayman's never played a full year as a starter. He's really good.
I'll go with they give him 8.75 at 8 years. He'll get close to his payday, I think, at the end of all this.
I think they cut back on the years because I don't think Boston wants to go commit 8 years to him. I'm going to say about a 4-year deal with about 7 million, 7.5 million. Boston will give him the money, but he'll have to bend a little on the contract length.
It'd be funny if that came up in the docu-series that's coming up.
Oh, fuck.
Swayman's yeah, these guys won't give me my fucking money.
He's been kind of going on a tour like that right now.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I was always thinking around like 7 years, like maybe 8.25, 8.5. But
yeah,
I think they're gonna have to pay him, or I don't know. They seem to be playing hardball with him, but
it's a precarious situation that they have there because, again, like you said, they traded Allmark, so like it's Swayman's net to lose once he signs. I think it's more Boston doesn't want to commit until they actually see more what Swayman truly is without having a tandem guy like Allmark.
Well, they don't have any prospects knocking on the door for goalie either, do they?
I think that they have someone, I think some 23-year-old or something.
Boosty.
Yeah, Boosty.
Apparently he's pretty decent.
Who's that? Sorry?
Brandon Boosty.
Oh, okay.
Apparently he's pretty decent. That's kind of what I keep reading. I've never seen him play or know much about him, but I've heard he's good.
I didn't know much about Swayman until all of a sudden he came onto the scene in Boston. So
yeah,
like
might be
some of these teams
there.
Yeah, some of these teams though, just how they just churn out goalies is crazy.
Yeah, we wouldn't know much about that.
No, our Colorado's good at finding goalies, but not turning, just bringing up developing goalies. All right, you guys have any last thoughts before we wrap things up?
Signed Mikko this week.
Hey, they signed O'Connor.
Yeah, I like that deal actually.
It was a good deal. We'll touch on that maybe next week. So, again, Trav, you got anything?
Buy your merch.
Yes, merch. We got it out last year. Obviously, not great, but I got the sweater. Show it off a little here. This is the very first like rough draft of what the sweater. It has been updated since. So if for anyone that wants to comment on how shitty it looks, yes, I know it has been updated and improved on.
Is it comfortable?
Oh, it is very cozy.
Well, that's all that
Oh
matters.
yeah, those sweaters are comfy.
Yeah. And I even switched companies, I think, for the sweater you got, Justin, from what I got, what this one is. So, but yeah, they're very comfy. Then obviously you get to go online, put a link in the description below. You get choose your color, help support the pod, and tune in next week. Thanks for tuning in. Obviously, we're again THPN network now. Glad to be a part of it on YouTube. Like the video, hit subscribe, help us out on any way. Subscribe to your favorite podcast platform, and just thanks for all the downloads and the listens.